Hi guys, buckle up, strap down and breathe deeply. We are going down the rabbit hole. Woohoo! Bye-bye! Do you guys know what one of the awesome things about not claiming to be an expert is? Nobody can really fault you if you change your mind, and I've done just that. I've decided to alter the process I'm using for putting down new core in the deck here aboard Athena. In this video, I'll show you that new process, and if there's time, I'll also show you the new, humongous hatch for the foredeck. Also, I think I might touch briefly on a small change of plans. As most of you guys know, as a part of a quick little refit, I'm in the middle of replacing all of the core in the deck here aboard my Warrior 38. I had hoped I could tie the new deck into the old by leaving a strip of the old deck in place. And that's why there's a strip, or lip as I've referred to it previously, of the old deck here along the edge. The thing is, I need this to be dry before I can bond the new deck onto it to be sure to get a good bond. And it's turning out to be very time consuming to dry out this old plywood and old foam. Add to that the fact that the owner of this awesome shed I'm in needs me out of here by October 1st, meaning I will have to have the deck fully sealed up by October 1st so that Athena can spend the winter outside. Well, in short, I'm running out of time, and I just don't have time to sit around waiting for water to evaporate. I need to pick up the pace, and the old process is proving to be way too slow. But that's okay, because then haben wir andere Methoden. The best method I can think of involves removing the old tow rail. That is something I had hoped to avoid doing because no doubt that's going to suck pretty dang hard. But in the name of picking up the pace and getting her done, that is what I need to do. The tow rail is through bolted to the deck hull joint, so for me to be able to remove the tow rail, of course, I need to get to the deck hull joint. So let's go ahead and step into my office here. Little pro tip, if you ever come aboard Athena, don't choose this cabin. It's rather cramped and there aren't even any port lights in here. It's very sparse. But at least there's more room in here than when I made that chain locker aboard Obelix. In an attempt to speed up the process of removing the nuts from the bolts that secure the tow rail, I've put together this Frankenstein doohickey. With this, I should be able to get at the nuts, even though the hull is kind of in the way. And of course, there always has to be one, or well, in this case, two nuts that absolutely won't budge. I think the only way for me to get those nuts off is with a bit of brute force. Enter Mr. Angle Grinder. Besides, working in a confined space with a death trap like this, what could possibly go wrong? Well, I think that was about it for in here. Let's hurry on up on deck and see if we can remove that tow rail. I tapped the bolts from down below with a hammer and most of them popped up, so at least I know those aren't corroded to the tow rail, which is good, but there are a few troublemakers up here, so let's see how this goes. Come on up, you know you want to. So far, so good. All that's left now are the troublemakers. I think there might be varying degrees of troublemakers. This one, not so bad. He was just a little late to the party. This guy just needs some gentle persuasion. See? He wasn't so tough. This little guy, he is not gonna be easy to get out, but I think he's forward enough that I can simply just lift the tow rail up. Well, here goes nothing. For me to completely remove this first section of tow rail, I need to separate this from this other piece of tow rail. They're held together by this doohickey here, but looking at this looks so corroded that I'm not gonna try loosening these nuts here. I'm just gonna go straight to cutting it. Nope. Woohoo! Bye-bye! And there we go. No more tow rail, at least on the first 1.5 meters. Thankfully, someone decided to use a sealant rather than an adhesive to seal up the tow rail. Otherwise, this job would have been a lot worse. This old sealant comes off pretty easily, but as you could see from down below, it didn't look like there were a lot of leaks from the tow rail, so this must be pretty good sealant. I got a link in an email a while back from someone suggesting I pick up one of these, and holy smokes, is this thing awesome. I'll see if I can include a link for this in the description. With the sealant out of the way, now it's just a matter of removing the lip. Despite my best efforts to dry out this small piece of plywood, and I have tried everything. I've tried heating it while under a vacuum, I've tried a bit of alcohol to draw out the moisture, I've tried every trick in the book. Despite those efforts, this still feels wet. And just like that, all of the foam and wood is gone. I'm gonna leave this area alone until it's had a chance to dry out. Fortunately, it's super sunny today, and that means it's gonna get hot as all heck here inside this uninsulated metal box that is the shed. So drying out that area shouldn't take all that long. Now I'm gonna go take care of my day job. Hi guys, it's a few days later and I've taken care of a little bit of prep work off camera, but let's head up and I'll show you. The astute will note that I've removed the old lip that was here and put down some of this new foam here. I did manage to get a very good bond between the plywood and the old lip that was up forward. So as you can see here, I do have a bit of fairing to do up forward, but that's no biggie. I think we're finally at the point where I'm ready to put down some foam on this section here. And that is where this package you saw me carrying a little earlier comes into the picture. I'm going to attempt to use vacuum to clamp the foam in place while the thickened epoxy cures. And there should be a few doodads in here that I need for that. There's a bunch more of this vacuum tape. There's some hose, some tees, and some through bag connectors, some more oil for my vacuum pump, and some of this stuff. This is an infusion spiral, and this is used, as the name implies, when doing infusion. Now today I'll only be using the vacuum to clamp down the foam, so that's not really infusion, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to have some of this lying around. As a part of the prep work, I also made a couple of templates to give me the shape of the foam I'll have to cut, because although it is foam, it is very dense foam and it's difficult to cut accurately with a Stanley knife. So this time around, I think I'll try something a little bit different. I've taped the templates to the foam using just a bit of masking tape. Now I'll trace the outline of the templates onto the foam, and then I can get busy cutting. I've set the depth of this cut to just a hair under the thickness of the foam in order not to cut into the plywood floor. But yeah, let's give this a go. Taking care of that last bit of foam to separate this piece from the rest should be relatively easy. There we go. Ta-da! I think that looks pretty dang good. Now there are some gaps, but that's okay. The only reason the gaps are bad are because I'm going to fill them with thickened epoxy, and thickened epoxy is expensive. But yeah, this looks good. I've already vacuumed this surface very thoroughly, but before I go ahead and start taping off everything and wetting out the surface, let's just go ahead and give it a quick wipe with some acetone. I have already wiped down this surface once, so I'm pretty sure it's nice and clean, but it doesn't hurt just to do it one more time. Just for good measure, I'm gonna go ahead and vacuum the foam too. I don't know if that's necessary, but it couldn't hurt. The very last thing I need to do before I start taping off this area is to pop down below in the chain locker again and seal up these holes here. The reason I haven't sealed up those holes is simple. I'm more or less going to be mounting the same hardware in the same locations, so I figured it'd be nice to use them as guides from down below and then just drill a hole up through the deck. If I patch the hole on top of the bottom skin, I'd have to worry about the curvature of the deck, and that could lead to more fairing, which leads to more hand sanding, which I don't want to think about. But I'm just going to pop down into the chain locker and I'll be right back. Well, that was time consuming as all heck. The big reason being the chain locker was quite dirty, so I had to clean a lot of it before the tape would stick. Oh, Jesus. Well, fingers crossed this works. I think I've got everything I need to get started. I moved the vacuum pump up here. I've got some plastic ready, some tape. I've put some breather cloth on top of some peel ply and one of those infusion spirals, and I've taped off the area. I think I'm as ready as I'm gonna be. Now would be an excellent time to point out that I am a complete noob at this, so don't just blindly go copying what I'm doing here. This is probably totally wrong, but at least in my head, the reason for the peel ply is so that the breather cloth doesn't get stuck on the foam if a bit of epoxy seeps up through it. The reason for the breather cloth and the infusion spiral is to help distribute the vacuum. Now I don't know if that is necessary here because this foam that I'm using is intended for infusion use. That's why it's got these little grooves here. But yeah, this can't hurt. There is a good chance this is gonna go horribly wrong. I'm just putting that out there before I make a mess of this. If I'm not able to get enough of a vacuum, or if there are tons of leaks or whatever happens, if I have to abort, I'll simply just weigh down the foam like I did on the first section up there. The big reason I would like to use vacuum is because the bottom skin is quite soft, and by using vacuum I'd be able to get a bit of clamping force on there without any weight. The big upside to that, of course, being that there would be no deformation of the deck. But yeah, let's see how this goes. I figured I'd better go ahead and adhere the forward part of the plastic to the tape before I start lathering everything up in epoxy. Maybe these two forward corners here would be a good place to put in a small crease to allow the plastic to conform to the shape of the foam. The annoying thing about this vacuum stuff is the fact that as soon as that plastic touches the tape, it's on there. So you can't put everything together and test to see if you've got a good vacuum and then pull everything back apart again. You just have to take a swing at it and cross your fingers. First step is, as always, just to wet out the surface. And I'll do the same for the foam. Thankfully, it's not that warm in here today, so I've got oodles of working time. With all of the surfaces wetted out, it's time to spread out some thickened epoxy. And that looks like a nice uniform layer to me. Everything is in place. That was the easy part. Now for the terrifying part. Seeing if I can pull a vacuum on this thing. Here goes nothing. Ooh, that does not look good. As you just saw, I am barely able to pull a vacuum, so there has to be a leak somewhere. But where? I can't find any leaks up here, so I better just pop down into the chain locker. Dang nabbit, I couldn't find any leaks down here either. All the holes are filled with thickened epoxy, and I can see that thickened epoxy through the plastic. And I figured if there was a leak from down here, I should be able to see that thickened epoxy bubble. So that only really leaves one option. So just to recap, I couldn't find any leaks down below. I haven't found any leaks along the perimeter of the plastic. That only leaves one option, and that's the forward foam. Like I showed you a little earlier, this foam is intended for infusion, so there are lots of little grooves, and also it's cut into tiny little pieces so that it can conform to the shape of the deck. Of course, air can pass through anywhere on this, but I had hoped I could seal this up with 3 coats of epoxy. Over the last couple of days, I've applied 3 coats of epoxy to this edge up here, and I was hoping that epoxy would seal up the foam and that the tape would seal against the epoxy, but I don't think that worked. But that's okay, that just means I can try again. Sure, it is slightly annoying that this didn't work because I wasted a lot of hours fiddling around with that vacuum stuff, but that's okay. The end result is still the same. The next section of core is in place. Thankfully, thickened epoxy doesn't require a lot of clamping force, so yeah, this should be okay. Good morning, guys. It's the next day. Now let's head up and see how that new section of foam turned out. The reason I turned off the vacuum pump yesterday, even though I was able to pull a slight vacuum, was because I didn't want to run the risk of drying out the area wherever that leak was. I figured it was just a better option just to weigh down the foam with those stones. Going by my luck yesterday, I better just go ahead and save these stones for the next time I try pulling a vacuum. Let's see if this peel ply does indeed peel. Yep. Even though my little vacuum experiment turned out to be a complete and utter failure, I'm still happy with the way this turned out, and it seems like there's a good bond, so that's good. All that's left for me to do with this section of foam now is just to fill up the gaps here with slightly thickened epoxy, and then this will be ready for the next step. Now that all the little cracks are carefully filled, I'm just gonna leave this alone until tomorrow. If any of you guys have some suggestions on how I could improve my chances of getting a vacuum on the next section of foam, I would love to hear them. I think I'm gonna go ahead and try the same approach again, meaning sealing up the forward bit of foam with some epoxy and see if I can't get a vacuum that way. But yeah, go ahead and leave your suggestions down in the comments. Just to keep you guys in the loop, the plan is to put down new sections of foam going aft and then use my router to match up the curvature of the foam perfectly to the curvature of the hull and also to round over this edge up here. Now I haven't figured out if I'm going to do that section by section or just in one foul swoop. That all depends on how flexible the deck is without the top layer of fiberglass on there. But more about that in a later video. That means I'm gonna keep this little hump here. Now I know some of you are wondering why I would do that, and quite simply it's because I can't really see any alternative. A naval architect that was kind enough to offer some advice strongly advised against extending the foam out any further. So yeah, besides, I don't really mind this little gutter here. I'm sure someone out there in YouTube land is gonna say, hey, wait a minute, that means water is gonna gather up here.
Well, that's true, but it would do that no matter what, because considering the deck is curved and that the holes here in the toe rail aren't flush with the deck and are never going to be flush with the deck, there could always be a bit of water here. So to put it another way, any water gathering up here is the fault of the toe rail and not the hump.
In the name of picking up the pace, I better get busy removing some more of that toe rail instead of running around here and shooting video. I am sorry the vacuum experiment didn't work out. I'm crossing my fingers for my next attempt because a success is always a little bit more fun to watch than a complete failure like this. But yeah, like I said, if you've got any suggestions, just go ahead and leave them down below. Just one last thing. I'm waiting for a quote on some new aluminum toe rail, something that looks a little something like this. Now, if you know someone that sells aluminum toe rail, or even better yet, if you've got some dirt on someone that sells aluminum toe rail, I would much appreciate your help in getting me a good deal. I've got the sneaking suspicion that this stuff is going to be hellishly expensive, so if it turns out to be super expensive, I might just see if I can refurbish this old toe rail. It is quite corroded and pitted, but yeah, we'll see. So like I said, if you know someone or if you've got some dirt on someone and you aren't above doing a bit of blackmailing, I would much appreciate your help and shower you with Sail Life mugs and t-shirts. With that quick encouragement to do a bit of blackmailing out of the way, that's basically going to be it for this video. I'm going to be back next weekend, and hopefully by then this section of the hull will have dried out enough that I can start patching up these old holes from through hulls, but we'll see. Okay guys, that is going to be it for this video. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!